Evening, everybody, and thank you so much for attending our Strata Community Training webinar this evening. We thank you for your support in relation to this initiative. And just to remind you that these sessions are recorded and we do send the recordings to you, so you can share that with other Strata committee members if you wish. Just to introduce myself, my name is Andrew Chunks. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Strata, and my job this evening is to keep you entertained for the best part of the next 60 minutes and talk all things electric vehicles, e-scooters and e-bikes. So I've got a lot to get through, but before I get to that, a little quick disclaimer here. This webinar is just for informational purposes only. If you prefer some specific advice for your strata scheme, we suggest that you seek professional legal advice. In relation to Net Strata, just before we get going, we have been established. We actually had our 30th birthday the other day, so we established 1996. Training's always been a big part of our organisation, training division since 2004, conducting our own CPD, continuing professional development since 2020. And basically our strata managers go through a pretty regimented set of training regime. So we've got our Certificate 4 in Strata Community Management. We have fortnightly Strata management meetings, and we've got a whole bunch of courses that we've either drafted internally or had various experts draft for us for our internal use only. And of course, we interact with our industry association, Strata Community Association, part of their professional standards scheme, and obviously conduct our usual continuing professional development regime every year. So we also, as I mentioned, we have a lot of self-drafted or expert-drafted content. Some little examples are there where we walk through strata basics. We have a building defect guide that we train our strata managers on. Everything fire protection, electrical handbook there, and roofing and plumbing guides and whatnot. That we actually get experts to come in and train our strata managers on these things. In terms of Strata Committee training, it is an initiative that we're into our fourth year. So 2023, we kicked this off and we had a plan of getting through all sorts of different topics and be really keen to hear what you would like to have, come up in the future. What would you like your Strata committees trained on? We're more than happy to draft content or have experts come and present to you. If you do miss out on any webinars, feel free to jump onto the links that are sent to you in the recording of this webinar. Also in the invitation that you would have received. If you scroll all the way down, you'll see the little icons advertising the various Strata Committee sessions, I should say, or webinars that I have run, either myself or with some of my colleagues or other industry experts. But today, what are we going to talk about? We're talking all things electric cars. Well, as much as we can fit into 60 minutes anyway. We'll talk about e-scooters, e-bikes. So really, we'll start off talking around the state of electric vehicles in Australia. So where are we positioned? And obviously with fuel prices recently, or at least in the last 2 to 3 weeks, been interested to watch the uptick of electric vehicle inquiries, or I guess possibly even e-bikes, people deciding to ride to the shops or other venues instead of jumping in their vehicle or diesel-powered vehicle. We'll talk about e-bikes and e-scooters. So what are the rules? There's a fair bit to unpack there, and there's some upcoming changes that I'll make you aware of there too. We'll talk about EV adoption and infrastructure. So how do your strata schemes think EV, and how do you bring that into your strata scheme? Strata approval requirements. We'll talk about benefits, costs and concerns, and we'll finish off with a little bit of a chat around assistance programs and guidance. So concerns in Strataland about EVs and e-bike scooters. So EVs, generally the questions we get here at NetStrata are around car space charges, load capacity. For example, some people inquire, can the building handle 50, 60, 70 or 100 EV vehicles to be charged at any given time? So we'll unpack that this evening. Also metering, how do we pass those costs back on to those people who have EVs? And common property works, and we'll talk a little bit around bylaws. In relation to e-bikes and e-scooters, the inquiries we get are usually around the lithium-ion battery safety. charging inside the lot. So how does that work and how do we know about it? Often we get asked the questions, can we get a bylaw to discourage or ban e-bikes or e-scooters? So we'll unpack that this evening. Storage in corridors or in car parks, can you do it? Yes or no? And I guess what is the fire response? Or I guess probably a segue to that is there any insurance impact if there is a fire? So we'll talk about that. So EV charging tends to be an infrastructure question, an approval question, while e-bikes and e-scooters, it's often talking about fire safety and those sorts of things. So let's kick it off with talking about the state of electric vehicles in Australia. I've got a whole bunch of numbers and graphs and things to throw at you just to sort of give you the lay of the land. So EVs represented 9.65% of Australian vehicle sales in 2024. That increased to 12.1% in 2025. I dare say that would be heading north, obviously, with the fuel issues that we have currently. Now, Australia now has more than 410,000 EVs registered on the road. There's about 153 EV models. And when I ran this or a similar webinar to this 3 years ago, there was only about 30 odd models available. So we've come a very long way in a short period of time. Up from 123 a year earlier. Australia's public charging network has also grown, just under 1,300 fast charging locations and at least 4,192 high-powered public charging plugs. So you can drive around and charge your vehicle rather than having to wait till you get home. New South Wales EV strategies aim for EVs to represent more than 50% of new car sales by 2030. That is huge, with the vast majority by 2035. The government is also targeting 12,000 passenger vehicle fleet to be electrified by 2030. So that's the government-owned vehicles. And they've also got a zero-emission bus program, which basically in the Greater Sydney by 2035, outer metropolitan areas by 2040, and regional New South Wales by 2047. Obviously, there's a bit more to work on there in the regional areas by way of infrastructure. Also, the luxury car tax, there still is a benefit for fuel efficient vehicles. So luxury car tax sits at $91,000 for fuel efficient vehicles, and it's a bit lower for $80,000 for other vehicles. Therefore, if you've got a diesel powered vehicle, for example, once it's over $80,567, you're paying luxury car tax, whereas that threshold's higher for an EV vehicle. You don't pay it until it gets to 91,387 to be exact. I promised some graphs, and here we go. We'll start with one. Tracking EV sales. So the source here is the EV Council, and basically what they've got here is a table showing us EV take up over the years. So 2011, 0%. All right, so that's I guess the starting point. 2012. 0.02. And we had vehicles like the Nissan Leaf and the original Tesla model, which I think perhaps came out in around 2014. But we did have, again, a couple of products back then that were floating around the sales market, but very, very, very minute take up. The uplift really happens in, say, 2020 over to 2021. Obviously, off the back end of COVID, people started getting out of their houses, I guess, and buying vehicles. And then we see that massive uptick, obviously, as fuel prices rise and government incentives favour electric vehicles. You see that uplift take off basically to a little over 12% in 2025. Now, in case you don't know what the acronyms mean, BEV, battery electric vehicle. So this is a vehicle that has a plug, has a rechargeable battery. It doesn't have a petrol or diesel motor, and the large electric range, generally 400 to 600 kilometres. Zero tailpipe emissions, so no pipes because there's no motor, right? A PHEV, what's a PHEV? A plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So this is one, has a plug, rechargeable battery, does have either a petrol or diesel motor, but obviously it has the benefit of having a plug-in hybrid system. And then you've got a hybrid on the right-hand side there, which obviously has a plug, is a petrol or diesel motor also connected with it. So on the right-hand side, you've got battery electric vehicle, and we've got the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle table there, so you can sort of see the take up there. Moving on, best-selling EVs. So I'm a bit of a car guy, so I was quite interested in looking at what is sort of trending at the moment. Tesla's still at the top there with BID taking out the next three positions from Tesla, who come in fifth place with the Model 3. So very much a Tesla and a BYD, and a little bit of Mitsubishi and Kia sort of dominated market there. So interesting to watch what happens. In terms of global trends here, so we've got 1 million EV sales back in 2017, 10 million EV sales in 2022, so that's huge. Nearly 14 million EV sales in 2023, and more than 17 million EV sales in 2024. 20 million in 2025. So the major player here, obviously, is not Australia by any stretch, but China, the Chinese market, the European market, and obviously the United States. Brands moving to 100% EV commitment. So you see a number of brands flag that. I've got a slide for you in just a moment. And there's also significant public infrastructure establishment. So you can see now up and down freeways, fuel stations having EV charging points and whatnot. Even perhaps your local fuel station. I know for me, I live in the Sutherland Shire, and there's a number of petrol stations that have segregated EV charging zones. So it's, yeah, obviously far easier to charge your EV vehicle. All right, so the brands on the screen here have committed to 100% EV by, obviously varying different years there. I think the leaders out there, Volvo, are very much in the front, charging away. So you've got brands like Tesla, obviously, that are 100% EV, but yeah, brands like Volvo have gone a massive shift to try and push their vehicle sales in that direction, as has the Tata Group, which I believe run Jaguar and Land Rover. So I'd say they're probably not too far behind. All right, global uptake. So again, Australia unfortunately is lagging behind there on the left, but I think there's worse. So I think, yeah, Japan and India have sort of a lower uptake than we do. And basically what you've got there is on the right-hand side, Norway, which EV or plug-in hybrid electric vehicles making up, probably in the 90s in terms of a percentage. So yeah, very close to 100% of their sales. Okay, moving on to something quite topical. So, e-bikes and e-scooters, what are the rules? So, we know that there's been a lot in the media, right? So, I don't watch the news that much particularly, but every time I turn it on, there's obviously stuff going on overseas, but there's always somebody on an electric vehicle doing something wrong. So, sorry, electric bike, I should say, or scooter or whatnot. So we've seen, bridge hoons over the Harbour Bridge. We've seen all sorts of news articles come out, and I'm here to sort of talk around tonight what are the rules. So you may or may not be aware of what the rules are with respect to electric bikes or electric scooters. So we'll start off here. So in New South Wales, and I'm going to talk New South Wales, obviously, because yeah, that's where you live, or you have an apartment. Obviously, if you logged onto this webinar, our portfolio is only in New South Wales. So in the e-bike land here, e-bikes are legal in New South Wales if they meet a permitted e-bike rule sort of schedule, and we'll talk around that. Now, you can ride them like a normal bike, which means following bicycle rules, wearing a helmet, approved helmet, and so forth. Now, legal e-bikes generally need to meet allowed power standards, and New South Wales recommends bikes that accompany with the EN 15194 standard. Now, privately owned e-scooters, so scooters, not bikes, are illegal in public areas in New South Wales, which means no private e-scooters are permitted on roads, footpaths, shared paths, or bike lanes. Now, yes, they're illegal. There are so many of them around. I'm not aware of too many people getting fined. You may be aware, perhaps, in your local area, of people getting fined or getting them taken off them or whatnot. However, yeah, as I said, they are illegal. Private e-scooters can only be used on private property. They remain illegal on New South Wales roads and road-related areas, including footpaths, shared paths, and bicycle lanes. However, shared hire e-scooters are allowed in approved trial areas. Now, you'll see particular councils allowing them. I know in Canberra, for example, there's a large contingent of companies that hire out scooters, obviously for people to get around the town, visitors to the area, etc. Now, in trial areas, riders must be at least 16 years old, wear a helmet, and follow the local speed limits, including 10 kilometres an hour on shared paths, 20 kilometres an hour on roads and bike lanes. So they are the rules. More rules. What are e-bike requirements? So when I said that they're permitted, if you have a look online, New South Wales government have a numerous amount of papers on this, and we'll look to sort of share a few of these when we send out the recording. But there are two types of permitted e-bikes. So there's the power-assisted pedal cycles, and electrically power-assisted cycles. So the rider must primarily propel these bikes. So they must have pedals. So you might have seen around people with e-bikes that look like basically electric motorbikes. So they've got pegs on them rather than pedals, and essentially they are just propelled via an electric motor. My understanding is those are illegal. They must be registered and insured, unlike a push bike that doesn't have to be registered and insured. So if you've got an electric e-bike, again, the rider must be able to propel the bike. So you must have pedals on it. So a motor can't be the only source propelling it. So the motor should only help the rider, like when going up a hill or facing strong winds. So if you jump onto the transport.nsw.gov.au website, you'll find a little search bar at the top. Type in e-bike or e-scooter, and you get some of these handy guides there that tell you what the rules are, etc. All right, there's some new e-bike safety standards which have been released not too long ago. So from February 1, New South Wales fully enforced new safety and certification rules for e-bikes, e-scooters, e-skateboards and hoverboards. I actually saw one of them in the city today, hoverboard, quite an interesting looking thing. The rules aim to reduce fires caused by poor quality lithium-ion batteries, especially in apartments and strata buildings. All e-micromobility devices and standalone lithium-ion batteries sold in New South Wales must now be tested and certified. Compliant products must display an electrical safety approved mark or certification number. So retailers must provide safety information on charging, storage and disposal. And it is now illegal in New South Wales to sell uncertified devices with heavy penalties for businesses. So strata schemes can also use these rules to support their bylaws about storing and charging only certified devices. So perhaps think about uplifting or improving your bylaws around that. All right, so here's an example of the certifying that would be marked on charges. So below is a list of the certifiers approved in New South Wales and their approval mark or number. And obviously the X represents the individual approved number. So you can see here fair trading, you've got other state government agencies, and you've got the little triangle with the tick and a bunch of different organisations there. Now where you'll find them on the safety information or the device information on the charger, again the top one there you see not approved in Australia. On the bottom right of the screen you've got the little triangle with the tick. All right, moving on, let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So the questions surrounding e-bikes generally sort of pivot around these couple of comments here. So can it catch fire? So we get a lot of people saying, hey, is that bike a good one, a bad one? Who pays? So who pays to charge e-bikes and e-scooters? Can we regulate it? So as a strata committee or an owners corporation, can we regulate them within our strata scheme or ban them? We'll talk about that. And will our insurer have a small nervous breakdown? More perhaps, but we're not quite there yet. So let's start with the first element of that question. So will this catch fire? So why do lithium ion batteries catch fire? I think is a good place to start. Lithium ion batteries are highly energy dense and contain electrolytes that are highly flammable. So there are several situations that can lead to these lithium ion batteries catching fire. Some examples on the screen. So overcharging or use of non-compliant charging equipment. So that is obviously equipment that's not related to that brand. So I think first and foremost, the advice to any e-scooter or e-bike person or owner would be, yeah, obviously make sure you purchase chargers with the bike that are rated, that obviously tick all the boxes in terms of safety and can be used for the device that you're purchasing. Overheating or exposure to heat or extreme temperatures. So I've seen some of these chargers outdoors, the nice sunny day, and they've got a bike out in in the common area or in their courtyard or something like that plugged in. Potentially obviously the heat from the atmosphere or the sun might affect that charger. And physical abuse, so dropping the charger or crushing it, piercing it. Often, you see them accidentally jammed indoors and things like that. Obviously, if you're damaging the cabling, that just increases the risk of having some sort of fire or short circuit. Short circuiting, so battery cell malfunctions or system faults, and also defects or contamination introduced, obviously during the manufacture. So moving on, who pays? In most cases, e-bikes come with their own chargers, right? So you might buy a push bike and e-push bike and it comes with its own charger, happy days. And therefore the bike owner would usually pay, right? It comes as part of the package. However, in some circumstances, owners corporations elect to install universal chargers on common property. Now, if that is the case, then generally speaking, you would have some sort of bylaw to administer that. So the other point to just make here as well is that you've got two types of charging your own personal bike, for example. You might have a battery that stays in the bike and you just plug it in the wall. Or some bikes, you see the Uber Eats people going around with quite a commercial looking e-bike. You see like a big battery pack under the seat. I believe those battery packs can be removed. So on the right hand side of the screen there, I'll try and shine my cursor over it. You might see examples where there's just batteries plugged into a wall socket. Can we regulate it? So yes, strata committees can restrict or regulate e-bikes to manage fire risk, but an outright blanket ban is likely to be unenforceable, as it may be deemed under, I think it's Section 139 of the Strata Schemes Management Act, to be harsh, unconscionable or oppressive under law. Instead, many strata schemes use bylaws to prohibit charging inside their apartments, so make them do that in a common area, maybe a basement area or something, restrict storage on balconies, or require mandatory compliance with Australian safety standards. Often application forms to charge e-bikes are a bylaw requirement in order to monitor charges being used. So it's very difficult to sort of manage that. If someone goes out to the shops on the weekend, buys an electric scooter or e-bike, carries it in, perhaps, nobody sees them walking into their apartment, plugs it in their lounge room. Very hard to manage, but you can pass a bylaw and obviously communicate that with your residents and your owners to say, hey, these are the requirements and the rules that we want to stand by to keep our buildings safe. Now, I did ask a solicitor friend of mine, because e-scooters are banned, could you have a e-scooter banning bylaw? And he said to me, look, I guess technically you could, because they're not allowed, on roads or pathways, etc. However, it's not illegal to store them, and that was a good point. So think about storage. You might have rules in your bylaws around storage. I guess particularly hard to enforce when most people probably store these sorts of things within their apartments or their townhouses, etc. But definitely some food for thought there. So common safety measures. So strata schemes often implement bylaws that enforce a number of things. In this respect, they might say, look, no charging in apartments or hallways due to the fire load on your individual panel and escape route risks. So we don't want them, a bike next to a fire next to a fire exit in case people are trying to get out there, number one. And obviously charging them could create a fire. And if that's in the common areas, again, near a fire escape, where are you going to go if the fire's right in front of the fire escape? Also a requirement for lithium-ion batteries to have an approved compliance mark. So again, that's legislated now. Prohibition of storing modified or damaged devices in common areas. Now, I've created a bit of a table here, and we'll look to put this as a PDF and share it when we send out the recording. But what bylaws can provide for. So I've sort of tried to summarise the topics on the left-hand side, so the different types of issues that you might have in your scheme, and I guess what we believe that a bylaw can provide for given the current legislation. So I'll just summarise a few rather than reading every word on the page there. But the topic, let's say e-bikes and e-scooters, what a bylaw can be used for example, regulate the use, storage and charging on common property. And a checklist of items you could consider in that bylaw would be, ban leaving them in lobbies, corridors, foyers and fire exits, set where they can and cannot be parked. require clear access to exits and services. Next one around battery and charger safety. You could set safety conditions for batteries and chargers, and obviously there's a checklist there on the right. Other items you can think of is storage inside lots. Again, can be quite hard to police. Nonetheless, you could, regulate that. EV charger approval process. So, whilst it might be simple for somebody to go buy an e-bike that comes with a charger and charge it in their apartments, you could think about creating a framework for an approval process whereby that's registered. Somebody in the building on the committee or the strata manager cites the charger to make sure that it is an approved charger. It's not just a cheap and nasty one that's potentially going to, catch fire. Also, works affecting common property, cost recovery and billing. You might think of, use of existing circuits, shared or common property EV infrastructure as well. You think of exclusive or special use areas. So you could give rights over common property where needed to charge these sorts of devices, but quite rare, I would imagine. Behaviour and nuisance control. So manage unsafe or disruptive conduct. So think about ban trailing cords across common property. I've got a couple of photos coming up on that one, but effectively that can be an issue where you do see from time to time people charging, their bikes in their apartment, and they've got a lead extending across the common area, and they're plugged it into the common area power point, things like that. So you could ban those cords. Ban charging that obviously creates trip hazards, etc., and obstruction of walkways. And limits on what a bylaw can do. You can sort of stop the overreach. Again, bylaws cannot be harsh, unconscionable, or oppressive. So you can make a bylaw about anything. However, it may or may not be enforceable. And often, if somebody within the building, an owner or an occupant, feels that they're unfair, off they go to NCAT with an application to see that the bylaw is overturned. So you just got to sort of make sure that your bylaws obviously are legal. All right, bylaws in summary. So bylaws in New South Wales are made or changed by special resolution, which means 75% of the unit of entitlement votes cast at a meeting are in favour of the motion. For EV charging, New South Wales current guidance treats it as sustainability infrastructure, slightly lower bar then. So if you're looking to install EV chargers, etc., there's a lower bar to ordinary resolution. So the safest approach is obviously usually risk management by conditions, not a sweeping prohibition. All right, moving on to insurance. So there's quite a bit to unpack here with insurance. So insurers are reviewing how lithium-ion batteries are risks in strata schemes, and some may now require disclosure. After an incident, generally speaking, schemes may face higher premiums or new exclusions in the short term. And owners corporations generally cannot pass premium increases to an owner just because they have a lithium-ion battery. Very difficult. So obtaining insurance, so many brokers are actually asking strata schemes to disclose if there are common EV charges or common charges for e-scooters or e-bikes. So like the example up on the screen there, if you've got a charging room, for example, this is, I believe, a building down in Melbourne. Obviously that has to be disclosed to the insurer. So a lot of brokers are asking those questions. Now, it is possible that questioning EV scooters in schemes becomes a pre-qualification question for insurance. So we're seeing the brokers ask the questions to disclose. Not in every case are we seeing that the insurers are actually requiring that disclosure. It's a bit of a mixed bag depending what insurer you're going to. All right, so in terms of risks, just to give you some data around e-bike and e-scooter fire statistics in New South Wales. So 2020, we saw 90 incidents 2022 rather, and 2023 combined. In 2023, 90 incidents. I just said that. 54 fires as at sort of 18th of August. I'm getting this from various sources online, and more than 275 lithium-ion battery fires in the state. So it's just under 300, causing 26 injuries, 876 evacuations as at 27 November. So again, various sources on that one. 2025, 100 e-mobility battery fires as at 28 November 2025. So that was a Fire and Rescue New South Wales data that I pulled that off their website. So have a bit of a look at that. You can jump on Google and just sort of grab those statistics at any time. So definitely an increase in obviously the risk. So you think 5 years ago you didn't hear anything about e-bikes catching fire, and all of a sudden we've got them popping up left, right, and centre. 2024 seemingly looking like one of the worst years. All right, let's talk EV adoption and infrastructure now. So in 2030, it's predicted that at least 15 to 30% of cars on the road will be electric vehicles. So EVs use rechargeable batteries and supply and store energy, and obviously there's an increasing demand of EVs out there on the roads. So some key factors that we've got to consider when we think about rolling out EV chargers in strata schemes. So the first one is the strata legislation. So we've got to always keep our eye on what's going on there, and often it's a matter of reviewing our bylaws to make sure that they're legal. Assessing demand and feasibility. So we'll talk about that in a few moments. Upgrading existing infrastructure might be a requirement. Also managing installation in the building. So what's the process? Step by step. Owners will want to know. Residents will want to know. If you're an EV ready building, they'll want to know what they have to do. What are the approved charges in the building? How do they go about applying? Who considers that application form? Is it the committee, the strata manager, or does it have to go to a general meeting every time? Again, this comes back to your bylaws and what the process is and how it's communicated with your occupants. Ongoing costs and billing, and obviously disputes do arise from the use of common property. So we're seeing some older sites where they've decided, hey, we're going to tear away 2 visitor spots and put EV chargers in there. All of a sudden, you've got vehicles charged all day, all night, and visitors can't park anywhere. So that's creating a little bit of a fuss out there in Strata land at the moment. So what are the implications for Strata? So more EV owners means that requests for charging infrastructure will become more frequent. It's just a given. People will need to charge them somewhere. Obviously, there's an increase in the infrastructure out there that councils are rolling out and fuel stations are rolling out, etc. But nothing beats the convenience of charging your vehicle at home overnight. This growing demand is influencing consumer behaviour and property values. Talk about that again in a few moments. Forward-thinking owners, corporations should plan for the adoption of EV charging infrastructure within their scheme. Now, I just want to talk about older strata schemes versus newer strata schemes, and sort of, I guess, the complexities that they may have in their own right. So on the left-hand side of the screen there, you've got an older red brick style apartment building. Now, from the photos, a little hard to tell, but their parking spaces are out the front of their building. So you can sort of see the mirror of a vehicle on the bottom right-hand side there, and you can see a bunch of lines and car parking spaces. So for this particular site, I guess the challenges are going to be weather protection for EVs. So you're going to have potentially, bollards in car spaces. You're going to have to saw cut through concrete to run, electrical cabling to, a bollard and a charger. So potentially it's unsightly at the front of the building. Also, as I said, it would just involve obviously some cutting of concrete or running conduit and that sort of thing. Buildings like that do often think about, okay, let's go get a DA and put, awnings and that sort of thing, so the chargers and the vehicles can be undercover when they're doing that. The positive, though, I would say, and I'm no expert in this realm, but I would say it's a lower fire risk given that the chargers are on the outside, they're not inside the building under the basement. So potentially from an insurer point of view, that style of apartment building, albeit it might be a concern when it rains, but there's ways of addressing that with weather protection and that sort of thing. Whereas the building on the right-hand side, if you think of a nice modern building with an underground car park, the positives are cables can be run on cable trays, and I'll show you some photos of that in a moment, on the ceiling spaces and run down walls, etc., making it a little easier than having to cut concrete, etc. However, again, as I said, the vehicles would be under the basement if there's a fire or that sort of thing. There's potential issues of obviously, being, a couple of levels below ground level and getting, access to it to be able to remove it or put the fire out and those sorts of things. So every building is different, and we would suggest that if your strata scheme or your owner's corporation are thinking about EVs, that you consult someone that can do a survey for you, for example, can look at an energy assessment and give you some advice whether your meter boards might need to be increased or altered or changed. You might need different power loading devices, etc. So yeah, no better opinion than that of an expert. You can then use that advice to evaluate your options. Think about your payment solutions and obviously approval and funding. So there's a number of companies out there that do that. You might have heard WattBlock on a few of our webinars previously. There's also other companies like NRG, the letters NRG, who also do feasibility studies and can quote on that sort of infrastructure in your buildings. So here's an example of a different company, so the NRG Electrical Engineering Company. So they'll typically go out to a building, have a look at the power boards and those sorts of things, and work out what needs to occur in order for you to install common chargers or have individuals put chargers in. So there's a checklist of items to consider here. I always think about modifications to switchboards is obviously number one there, and distribution boards. So what has to happen to the power infrastructure of the building in order to be able to cope with an increased load. Additional upgraded cabling and cable trays, so trays on the ceiling of underground car parks that carry the cabling from one space to another. Upgrading to three-phase power in some instances. May also need to consider bollards for charging stations. So where you've got cable trays across the ceiling, you might have to run them down from the ceiling on a pole or a bollard if there's not a wall nearby. So many car parks don't necessarily have walls behind them. They might have 3, 4, 5 rows of car parking within a garage basement. Therefore, the ones in the centre are probably the hardest to draw power to. So we've got to think about bylaws and poles and that sort of thing, and how do we get the power there. Software for load management. So how do you deal with load management? You deal with it with software. So if you had, for example, a basement with 100 car spaces and let's say 30 of them are occupied by EV vehicles and chargers, the software would basically assist you in managing the load capacity for the building and ensuring that obviously enough load is going to each space, which potentially means that they don't get 100% charge. They get a lower amount, but power is obviously load managed throughout the basement. Another thing to think about is Wi-Fi for load management. So think about your garage basement scenario. You've got chargers 2, 3, 4 levels below ground level, sometimes even more. Having Wi-Fi down there, obviously for the chargers to talk to one another and obviously be able to talk to the load management software in order to regulate that load. Got to think about chargers in common areas or chargers for individual parking spaces. So it's highly recommended that owners corporations get advice and obviously recommend chargers that are compatible with the infrastructure that's been laid out. And obviously the look and the feel of the basement as well is also important. We've also got to think about bylaws for use. All right, so there's various different models that we can think of here. There's the individual model, so that is where an individual will apply to have their own charger basically installed in their own car parking garage or space, like the Tesla on the left-hand side there. You might have a shared model where you have one charger or 2 or 3 chargers in a building. And any owner or occupant can access that charger. You might have a modular model where it's sort of a bit of both, or a whole building model where you've got common chargers and you've also got chargers for individual parking spaces. Software example. So basically, software is king here. So there's an example here with ChargeFox. I'm by no means pushing particular products, but a load management software I'm familiar with is ChargeFox. So you can make revenue from common area charging stations using the software. So if your Strata scheme said, hey, we've got 100 parking spaces, we're going to put 5 dedicated EV charging stations there, you would basically have a situation where occupants could set up an account or like a pay wave sort of scenario where they would obviously pay for the charging as they go. Recover energy costs from individual charges. You can use software for that. So, for example, if you've got one electricity bill for the whole building and you put a charger in everybody's car space, how do you pass that electricity back to the vehicle owner? Often you can do that via software. So you basically, as an owners corporation, can recover that energy load or cost rather. And obviously the connection, as I said a moment ago, generally via Wi-Fi for load management, etc. Let's talk charges for a moment. So it's all about the speed. So the obviously more expensive chargers, the quicker they charge. Generally speaking, if you look at the table there, so we've got some examples of a level one charger. So just a simple one that can be plugged into a freestanding wall charger and a vehicle. You'll pay anywhere between $300 to $600. I'm seeing them even cheaper than that. Example of a wall-mounted charger. So this is something that if you were to roll out in a garage basement and suggest a charger, you might give a few suggestions. One could be a wall mount charger that someone could install on the common area wall within their car parking space and obviously charge their vehicle. They'll pay a bit more for that. And obviously, as you can see above there, the level twos obviously have a higher output and effectively can supply energy a bit quicker there. Example on the right hand side, a level three DC fast charger. So you can see, yeah, the 75 kilowatt power supply, so 390 kilometers an hour. That's able to, sorry, 390-kilometer range in 1 hour of charging, I should say. The charger doesn't drive at 390 kilometers an hour, but yeah, hopefully you got my point there. Moving on, other considerations. So, as I said a moment ago, cable trays on the basement ceilings. So, you've got to think about how you get the electricity from one end of the car park to the other. So, an example on the left-hand side there of a wall mount EV charging point, which is fed by a cable tray on the ceiling. So, if you follow the little white conduit there, you'll see what I mean. Bollards to mount chargers, you can see on the right-hand side. Now, that's an owner's corporation that's obviously had the energy cables laid in the concrete slab, which can then obviously come up the bollard. So that's probably potentially a newer site where the developers obviously planned for that under new laws. And as I said a moment ago, you've got the Wi-Fi internet for load management. Also, you can think of Wi-Fi as a positive. How many times have you driven into a basement garage and you run out of phone reception and you're taking an important phone call? You could also have a bit of a sell to the residents that they could potentially connect to that Wi-Fi network when they're in the basement, stay on the phone or whatever the case may be. Maybe they can do their emails in the car in the garage basement or something like that. Anyway, moving on, so stage rollout plan. So here's some examples. So Rome wasn't built in a day, and EV infrastructure often can't be built in a day either. So think about phasing your rollout in your strata scheme. So phase one might be just upgrading the power, and that might be what you do that year. You get a quote from a bunch of electrical consultants, and that's step one. Step two then might be adding a common area communal charger, and look, that probably won't touch the sides in 3, 4, 5 years' time when the EV take up is much higher, but it might help for the short term. Then the next phase might be, okay, well, in year three, we'll think about some cable trays on each level and we'll get a Wi-Fi connection happening. Phase four might be additional power upgrade, obviously to get a bit more juice. Obviously when you're seeing the uptake of electric vehicles within the building. And phase five there, all parking bays, in a perfect world, EV ready to go. Going to give you a case study here. So I saw this on the Driven, which I got an email a couple of days ago. It's a very current case study here. So there's a Melbourne strata complex which installed a whopping, I say that word, whopping 251 EV charging points, showing obviously large apartment buildings can support EV charging. So this project is being presented as a proof that obviously apartment EV charging is practical and insurable. The rollout included a charger for every car space plus a commercial fast charger. So if your little charger in your car space didn't quite cut the mustard, you could go up probably to the ground level and get a Tesla fast charge. The system uses smart load management, so not everyone draws power at once, and the building avoided needing new substations. Each owner pays their own charging costs through the software, which helps solve one of Strata's biggest concerns around cost. The charging system is linked to the building fire alarm, so charging shuts off automatically if there is a fire. So handy tip there. And the article says attitudes in stratas are shifting with obviously less resistance from committees and insurers as understanding of EV charging improves. So you can look that one up, jump into Google. I think it was, I can't quite see the date on my screen there, but I think it was like the 16th of March or something like that. That article was there, so you can jump online and have a look at that. Strata approval requirements. So let's talk governance. What approvals are required? So commonly when you're adding to common property, so let's say that somebody would like to add a bollard in their car space and the concrete is common property and therefore they're drilling a bollard into the concrete, there would be a special resolution. So 75% of the unit of entitlement votes at a general meeting voting in favour of that motion. And you can find that rule in section 108 of the Act. When you're adding sustainability infrastructure to common property, it's slightly different. Again, you require a general meeting. So a general meeting means all owners are invited to attend to the meeting. Ordinary resolution, so it's 50% if it is a sustainability infrastructure measure. And you'll find that in the Sustainability Infrastructure Act 2021. Considerations, so obtaining an EV feasibility study, EV bylaws for common use and individual use. So think about that. Potentially you might have an older EV bylaw that you might need to consider alterations to. Funding arrangements, so think about that. Is the owners corporation in a position to, as I said a few slides ago, think about staging a rollout of EV infrastructure? Depending on costs, or are you going to think about special levies and those sorts of things? Approval for software or billing or cost recovery and load management, and also consider tenders or quotes for the work, and obviously, as I said, staging it over years. We're in the final throws, and then we'll open to see if we've got any questions in the chat there. But benefits, costs, and concerns. So let's start off with some benefits. Start off with the positive. Lower maintenance and running costs for residents who own EV vehicles. So particularly at the moment with the cost of diesel, I mean, I paid $3 or $2 or $2.99.9 the other day for diesel, so it's quite expensive. An EV charged up off the grid can be 5 times cheaper on fuel costs compared with a comparable petrol vehicle. Now that stat was many months ago, so that's potentially even a better case for EV vehicles now. Has the potential of raising property values. Now, if you're an investor and you have a rental property and it's on the market and your potential tenant has an EV vehicle, and let's say your building has absolutely no infrastructure, no bylaws allowing them to put in their own charges at all, it's highly likely that they'll go to the next property and say, hey, I need to find something, a potential rental that allows me to charge my vehicle. Otherwise, I've got to go down the supermarket every 3 days and plug my car in there and run the gauntlet that all the charges are full. So it just has that ability to, obviously increase demand if you do have that infrastructure in your building. So, it could have also the ability of attracting buyers. Again, they might have electric vehicles. They might be, in the market to find somewhere where they can charge their vehicle. Costs, so they're going to vary from scheme to scheme in terms of the rollout, but I think the best place to start is a feasibility study. So Wattblock, you jump on their website. There's a gentleman by the name of Brent Clark. He runs Wattblock. You can reach out to him and say, hey, can I have a quote for a feasibility study? Anywhere from $1,500 to $6,600, depending on the complexity. Now, a $1,500 report might be a 10-lot red brick site. $6,600 report might be a 600-700 lot strata scheme with 10 garage levels or something like that. So obviously it depends on the level of work that the consultants need to look at. So think about obviously upgrading existing infrastructure costs a lot of money, and the installation costs and the ongoing operational costs. So in terms of ongoing operational costs, you can think of, if you have Wi-Fi in the basement, you're obviously going to have to pay internet costs. Some buildings are already Wi-Fi ready if they've got building management in there, etc. But you've got to think about that. Concerns. So there's obviously disputes around fair usage for shared EV chargers. Everyone fighting over that spot. Your vehicle has 10 kilometres left and you've got to go for a long drive, and you pull up home and there's 2 cars already parked in the EV charging points and you can't charge it. That could be a downside. Future electricity load and demand might be an issue, and obviously potential EV fires. With respect of insurance, again, fires are a concern. Sprinkler systems may not put the fire out. Obviously, lithium-ion batteries aren't easily put out with water. They need other retardants. So in the future, will we see that as a requirement? I don't know. Watch this space. Insurers may drive, excuse the pun, resolutions. So that may require certain fire retardants being installed. So it might not be a government requirement, but insurers might say, well, hey, every charging point needs an extinguisher next to it. I'm just making that up as an example, but that is a possibility. Now, concerns, so we're finding that some occupants may be connecting their vehicles to common area power points without consent. So, an example on the screen there, we've got a Toyota Prius there with a nice extension lead going to the common power point, and you've got someone trying to hide it on the right-hand side there, nice little cover over their bikes, and they've got them plugged into the common area power. So, if you put a cover over it, someone's not going to notice. Well, in this case, they did. Moving on there, assistance programs and guidance. So, what's out there? So, there's a list of suggested supplies for installation on various government websites. So, you can jump onto energy.nsw.gov.au, jump into the search function there, type in EVs, and there's a pile of information there for you on federal and state grants. Be obviously familiar with any initiatives or grants from your local council as well. So, some councils are very much EV friendly in comparison with others. They also offer council seminars from time to time. Case study here, Richmount building at Piedmont. Now, this particular building was co-funded by the New South Wales government to upgrade the electrical system to enable EV charging in all 104 parking spaces. So again, a good example of an owners corporation being proactive and using a government grant. Future directions, so right to change law, charge laws, whereby residents have the right to charge their vehicles, and we're seeing obviously new buildings with the new requirement that they have to be EV ready. And here's an example of an EV ready building in our portfolio out at Melrose Park. So this was a building delivered by the developer with EV chargers in every parking spot. So you can see a nice little example there where all the cabling is nice and neat in the concrete slab. And obviously bollards with individual chargers there, very handy. A visual example for you. So by 2030, EVs make up 15 to 30% of vehicles on our roads and 50% of new car sales market. That's a stat that I gave you. Now, 15 to 30% of your parking spaces might look like the little graphic on the screen there. So if you've got 20 odd spaces, you've got to think that, there's going to be quite a number of parking spaces with chargers hooked up to electric vehicles. All right, before I close the webinar, I will have a little bit of a look in the Q&A here. So I did a pretty poor job of advertising the Q&A at the beginning of the webinar, but let me see what I've got here. All right, so we've got a couple of questions here. So we've got one, what if people are plugging e-bikes to charge into common electrical sockets around the building? Can we stop them as a fire hazard? That is a really good question. There are multiple ways, and that was a question. Thank you, Steve. In terms of plugging any device into a common area power point, owners corporations don't have to supply their power for free. So many schemes put locking devices over their power point. So just a little plastic cover that you can get an electrician to install with a padlock. Potentially committee members might have that, or the cleaner might have that to be able to plug in their vacuums, etc. But yeah, definitely you can monitor that. You can have bylaws that you do not charge in the common areas, for example, because that's drawing on the owners corporation's power. Next question here. If a fire is caused by a tenant's e-bike, who pays? For example, the insurance excess. Okay, so you can have bylaws to regulate this and ask for the individual occupants to have insurance. They might have contents insurance or something like that that potentially may respond. But if it's a bike in a common area and potentially goes on fire, it's probably a low probability that anyone's going to claim responsibility for it, which in that case may be an owners corporation cost, but certainly something that you could consider in your bylaws. Who is responsible for ensuring tenants' e-bike chargers are compliant? So, I would suggest that it is a bylaw that would regulate any e-bikes in the building or e-chargers be registered, so that they fill in a form. Now, very difficult, as I said, to monitor if someone comes home, 10 o'clock at night with an e-scooter, comes up the lift and puts it in their apartment. If you don't have a building manager or an active committee watching that happen, it can be very hard to enforce that. However, yeah, obviously, as you find those occupants, you can remind them of what the bylaw is if you have one in place. Um, all right, let me just have a look here. All right, what else have we got? Sorry, I'm just trying to flick through as many as I can read and talk at the same time. All right, we've got a question here. Is it feasible to install chargers into individual garages? Depending on the building, I guess it depends on your location from your metering apparatus, like your metering room to your individual car spaces. It can be quite cost effective if you're local to I guess, where the power's drawn from, or it can be quite expensive if you're, 100 meters away from that. So I would suggest that you start off with a feasibility study and you throw these questions at an expert, ask them to come up with some indicative budgets, and you can obviously go out and quote that. Obviously, depending on the complexities of your building, you may need cable trays and those sorts of things, wiring coming down from ceiling spaces, and obviously powering individual chargers. Another one here. Example of model set of bylaws for a new apartment block to restrict e-bikes and e-scooters. We can certainly help you with that. Reach out to your strata manager. We do have some template bylaws that we can recommend in that respect, and we're sort of seeing some new developments with interesting bylaws coming forward. All right, let's have a look here. All right, what does the bylaw do to protect us if they don't have insurance? Very good question. The bylaw could pass some, if not all, of the costs back to an individual. So, for example, with installation of chargers, I assume that question is around if there is a fire. Potentially in that respect, you may be able to, yeah, again, recover the excess costs, but yeah, best that you consult a solicitor about drafting a bylaw in that respect. All right, another one here. Can an owner of an EV vehicle using the PowerPoint in the garage, if the power is metered to that apartment? Yes, I have seen that done quite effectively. So I have seen a number of residents say, "Hey, I'm the only one in the building that wants an EV. Therefore, can I pay to run the cabling myself from my own meter to my car spot?" And the answer is yes, that can happen. Remember that it would obviously have to pass through common property if it's coming from the meter room through a common wall, potentially into a parking space or garage. In that respect, you would need a bylaw, potentially an individual bylaw for that occupant, but I have seen that in many cases. So that is an option. So if you've got, if you're the only one on the island, everybody else has, got diesel vehicles or something like that, and you're the only one with an EV, and they're all anti-EV chargers, you could say, look, how about I pay for my own bylaw, I pay for my own conduit from the meter room and power it myself using my own meter. Not a problem, but get a bylaw drafted, consult your owners corporation. Another one here. Do you have statistics on EV fires over the last 5 years? Yeah, I don't actually have them in my slide pack there. If you jump onto the EV Council website, you might find some statistics there. I'll try and do a little bit of a deep dive if I can and provide some answers to that one at a later date. All right. Possibly the last question here we've got time for. When you say pass costs back onto an individual for fire damage excess, do you mean to individual lot owner or tenant? Very good question. Usually it is the lot owner. Unfortunately, an owner's corporation generally does not have a contract with a tenant. Very hard to bill them. You could send them a bill, but obviously they could move out. You'd need to, get a debt recovery agent to follow them, but usually speaking, you would pass that to the lot owner. And we always recommend that lot owners consider having a capture all sort of recovery of cost clause in their lease with their tenants, that they might be able to recover any costs that are borne, obviously, by the actions of a tenant. All right. I think that is probably all I can answer. Oh, there's one more quick one here. Could I use a portable charger? I don't know how it all works, but assume I can plug into my own PowerPoint. For e-bikes and e-scooters, yes, you can. Make sure they comply with the government charger standards and it's compatible for your e-bike or e-scooter. In relation to electric vehicles, yes, you can. Plug it into just a standard wall point. Generally, they're very, very slow though, and you would need the owner's corporation's consent if you're drawing power from a common area. So usually speaking, that's not permitted unless you have a bylaw or you have some sort of rule in your building allowing that. There's a whole bunch of questions I wasn't able to get to. I will try and draft some answers to send out with the recording of this session. Again, thank you so much for attending the webinar. We will send a recording out. Feel free to share that with whomever you wish. On the screen there, if you don't have our Strata app, feel free to download that. You can report issues in your building, maintenance concerns, and those sorts of things. Again, feel free to stay connected with us. Look us up on Facebook or Insta, etc. We'll have our next Strata committee training in June, so we'll likely publish the date of that in late May or early June and invite you to that. And again, thank you so much for your support. Without your support, these webinars could not happen. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening.